I'm tempted to have us all just circle around and have her sit on the couch and we have a conversation.
I'll do this the right way.
She said there isn't gonna be any high tech.
Story time, that
Sorry,
sounds.
yeah,
We're
no
going all the way
high
back
tech.
to McCormick Hall in our.
Yeah.
No tech, just a lawnmower to keep us busy. Nice to have you here today.
Oh,
Thank you for digging through all those archives and all those rooms and all those treasures.
yeah, well.
Well, and that's just the last 25 years, right?
Yeah. No, the archives used to be in really great order when Mr. Hal Layton asked me to set it up. And it was basically all of Dr. Kessler's materials, so that was great. And then a bunch of Hal's materials and a few other things. And then once the archives were neatly set up, it took me about a year to do it. And then it was just like, okay, it's set up for somebody else. And, and guess what? And now it's piled full of things again, and it's moving over. I love it. It's moving over into the Queen room because we needed additional space, but it's all good. Anyway, oh, well, since it's all just friends here, what do you want to know? I was very honored, Mary, when Mary, on behalf of the 150th committee, asked me to do this book. Of course, she knew that I'd done the Dumplings and Company books and a couple of others, but you know what I really do is sort of scholarly, English stuff. But what I found out is it's really fascinating to do histories. And I remember Dorothy Cree when we were teenagers, Karen.
Yeah.
Working on this book, and at the time, her daughter was at Yale. Her dad, Dean Weir, remember, from Hastings College, was writing the history of Hastings College. And so Dorothy Cree was writing the entire first 100-year history of Adams County, remember, at the same time that she was writing this. And she was one very wonderfully driven woman. And the way Dorothy set up this book was as a series of essays, basically going through the different ministers, and so it's really helpful on that. And then toward the end of the book, she also included a couple of important subjects that might not have gotten covered if you're just focusing on each of the ministers, and then several chapters on Dr. Kessler and what he'd done during the different phases. But then she gets to, right towards the end, the Ministry of Music, which had to show up, really important. The Christian education program, which changed dramatically during those 100 years. And I love how she phrased this, women's activities, which covered the missions and everything else that the women are doing, because I think she was, as a woman in the 60s and then 70s, 73 when this came out, she really thought, well, we have a lot of pictures here of men, and maybe we should spread this out a little bit. So I remember when she was working on this, and then she died really young, and so thank goodness she got this finished. And then Penny Lundgren, this was a funny, Judy Lundgren was our really good friend from grade school all the way, and so we mainly knew Penny as Judy's mom. But two funny things. Penny Lundgren, as we all know, real name is Peace. And so Lisa and I decided that really she was a Quaker. And because, peace, faith, you could be a Puritan or you could be a Quaker. But she struck us, we thought she would be a Quaker, or her heritage must have been Quaker, because she believed that women were equal to men and could just stand up and lead worship, lead conversations, whatever. And therefore, we decided, well, this is good. We should read up a little bit more on the Quakers and find out exactly what they believe. Anyway, she wasn't a Quaker, but she did work at the newspaper. And so I have to tell one funny story that I just found out, since I'm working on the Adams County update book right now, trying to figure out how Penny Lundgren was actually indexing all of these pictures. And there was one great picture that I wanted to use, and it was a guys installing radio equipment from the trunks of cars. And so what the picture was is they have their legs hanging out of the trunks of cars, and they're lying down on their backs with their arms up, installing the radio equipment. And so the way Penny had archived it, and it took me a lot of research to find this, is legs and trunks. And you're sort of expecting, a male model or something like this. And it's these guys, nothing about the radio, nothing about what they're, anyway. What Penny did really interestingly, and it's helpful to me, is looking at the 25 years after Dorothy's 100 years, and then what to do, what to emphasize that would be a little bit different, but that would definitely show what had happened in that 25 years, from 73 to 98. And so rather than focusing on each of the ministers, she gave this quick little 2-page summary of major events in 25 years of the church. That's it. Bam, 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 bam. And then spent the rest of the book focusing on themes. So the pastors, she listed them. Okay, Christian education, worship and music, ministry at home, ministry abroad, Presbyterian women, the building and its Christian symbols, membership and budgets, and then church directory, Quasquecentennial celebration, and really nicely from all of the congregation, an invitation to share memories, their personal memories of the end of the church as long as they knew it, not just in those 25 years. So knowing that this book, the 1998 to 2023 book, is actually going to be the third in this series, I was trying to think, and I was talking with Karen about what would be an interesting way to follow up on this history. And Karen said, let's see, doing something spatially. And so I was thinking, one of the really central things that happened in 1998 is the library, the library that we all remember, the nice open library with D. Schiffler there. It became part of the new south entrance. And all of those wonderful decorations that we've gotten, a lot of them came from those original stained glass windows that were in the library. But what I noticed, and Karen was saying think spatially, and what I noticed is if you stand out in the parking lot, and we now have this wonderful parking lot here, but you don't enter the church from Lincoln, as we all did growing up, where you parked there, you walked up the 7 steps, you got greeted, and then you're immediately looking at the pulpit, and you walk down the aisles, and everybody, well, way back then, a lot of people had their special places that they always had. And some people traveled around, but and then you see the choir loft in the back. But what's really interesting to me, just spatially, is if you walk from the parking lot now and you look at the church, first you see that new entrance, but then what really struck me is from that particular view, you also see the education wing that we remember being built. And then you look right and you see, well, the Manual Arts Building, but now it's the Peace Center. And there's something just intriguing about looking at it that way that made me think, hi, Margaret and Charlie.
We had to ask for this room.
So I'm just talking about our new entrance in 1998 and looking at it, and it looked to me just visually like not only are we looking at the church in a different way from the outside, it also looks like it looked to me like two outstretched arms, like we're embracing in a different way, not just walking up steps and here we are in the sanctuary, but we're embracing in a different way. Education, music, but also mission and out here. And so it seemed really interesting to me. And then, only the ministers ever used to get the view of the sanctuary from the memorial room because, they used to duck in on the little doors, but then they were walking through the memorial room and around. And so they got this gorgeous view that we now get, which is you walk up those same 7 steps, but they're interior or, slide up. And you walk into the memorial room and what do you see? The windows to the north, that stained glass window with the other two that, we never looked at because we're sitting here looking at, whatever, but you don't see it that way. And since we're high, the pulpit is here, and so you're actually looking at the pulpit this way, and then sort of following what Karen was thinking, but what I noticed is you notice how those curved pews are so beautifully perfect. We know they're curved, but when you come in the back way, you don't really notice it visually. And then you get to walk around and enter from like we always did. But I thought it was really interesting that it adds a second perspective for this last 25 years. And so that's one of the things that I thought would be really interesting for myself to use as a guiding principle for the third book in this series is just that we're adding a perspective. It's actually visual, but just also in terms of what the church is doing, what sort of activity we're really engaged in. And guess what? It still gets to be Christian education and music, but it's just here, and it still gets to be mission, but it's different, and it's much more involved in the community, specifically related with the Peace Center. And I'm just looking at Charlie and Margaret and I'm thinking, but of course, as we all know, Presbyterians have been very involved civically from the very beginning of this church and all the way through, but just in different ways. So anyway, my idea for this next 25 years, I was looking at these covers, and this is the nice woodcut Presbyterian church, and this is the nice tidier one. But I thought what might be interesting is to have the picture on the front be at that new south entrance. Just because we always take it from this view or this view and not just straight on. And then I thought when you open the book, you could see the two arms because you could then spread it all the way out. But just to, sort of do that. And I thought, since it's only a 25-year book, 1998 to 2023, but it's actually coming at the 150th anniversary. So I thought we should do something on the front that suggests 150 years and our story is still unfolding, something like that to keep it going. Not maybe a scroll, but a book. So somehow use a book, and I let the visual artists take care of that. But anyway, this was my idea just for the organization of the book, and this is based on following what Penny and Dorothy both did, which is all of the newspaper articles about the church for those 25 years, and then all of the annual reports. And I know people laugh about annual reports, but it's amazing what I learned from just reading through in order the annual reports to see just how things developed. And I think everybody who is super active in the church during these 25 years, you remember certain highlights. But if you're just reading the whole series of annual reports in a row, it's like, oh, so that's what's happened. The mission statement changed here and changed here. And with this minister, in came the Stephen ministry, for instance. And with this minister, different emphases. And so I thought the actual organization of the book might look something like, well, we'll start with Carl Utley, because he was the minister 2 years, 1996, but he was the first minister, 1998 to 2002, and the interim ministers. And then Reverend Bill, pretty hilarious stories on him, but how he became that next minister after the interim minister, and the things that he emphasized. But I also learned some really interesting things. He was the minister while the United Presbyterian Church General Assembly was making decisions on different ways for governing, different responsibilities for the governing boards. He was also minister past when we were young, and the Presbyterian Church, 1 out of 13 people in Hastings were Presbyterians. And we know that during this period, by 2004 to 2014, when Reverend Bill was here, the actual church membership shrank. And so I wasn't aware of this, but from the annual reports, I can see that the church went through a series of conversations with the presbytery on how a church actually needs to organize itself if it doesn't have 1,800 members, if it has 800 members. And so he was very concerned with those sorts of issues. And then towards the end, it was, and what is the position of the Presbyterian Church on gay marriage? And so other struggles. But I asked Reverend Bill if he would just write down a few paragraphs about several moments. He remembered, and everybody asked me, well, did he write a few paragraphs for 20 pages? So I told Pastor Greg, oh, it's only 5 pages. And he tossed it back to me and he said, this is 5 pages, front and back, single spaced. This is 20 pages. But anyway, I mean, he talked seriously about some of the central concerns. And then when I talked to him afterwards, great stories about central things that he remembers, small stories. So I thought a little on Carl Utley, not the whole 20 pages on Reverend Bill, but and then there was this period between when Bill was ill, towards the end when he was ill, and his retirement, all the way till we got Pastor Greg. So it was 3 years. And I was reading both annual reports and session minutes on this difficult time, as well as interviewing people. And Greg wanted to call these years the great unpleasantness. But because of the southern connotations of that, I suggested, the New York City Public Library Lions, Patience and Fortitude. So I thought maybe we could call it the patience and fortitude of our lay leadership. But we just remember it for, only you know. We remember the great unpleasantness. But I think it was a really important period. And a sort of amazing stories came from that. What really drew the congregation together when you're having a series of ministers popping in, heads of staff preaching, and what actually keeps congregation together. And then Greg comes, and COVID hits his family. And so then we had another real challenge. But then I thought, after maybe spending more than the 2 pages on the highlights, but maybe not quite essays like Dorothy did on each of those periods, that I would also focus on Christian education, the church college connection, obviously the music ministry, especially with the Langenberg bequest that came, Presbyterian women and missions, and then have all of our sesquicentennial photographs and comments towards the end. Penny gives us whole bunches of statistics on every person in the Presbyterian Church who served at any time in the Presbyterian level or higher. And so we have those entire lists. And I thought it makes good sense for people way past us to have a ready reference, but I'm not going to repeat what either Dorothy or Penny outlined or listed. Just follow that up for the 25 years. But the final thing, and that's why I'm so happy that you're all here, is I loved Penny's idea of asking the actual members of the congregation for central memories. But I was thinking maybe just these last 25 years, just the magic moments for you as you're thinking about them. So I invite all of you, and remember, you only get to write. Yeah.
5 pages.
No 5 pages. It's only, I remember when, it's short paragraphs, a paragraph or 3. So you have to be really concise. And so we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We need 11 plus about 5 more so that we have 15 or 16. But I think that would be wonderful because it's the voices of the congregation, not just what happened and what the issues were, but the stories too. I think that's what really helps shape a church history. And yes, Penny didn't put in an index, Dorothy did, and the 150th committee asked me to index, making reference to the earlier books, so that we have a complete index, and we'll have 3 books together. I thought I was going to need to have the rough draft of this totally finished by the end of this year. And the 150th committee said, nah, we'll give you until next summer. And since I have this, which I can type with my left hand, this until and I can move this wrist, I can move the elbow so I can make my fingers be like this, but I can't get them both on the keyboard at the same time, and this one doesn't move very well. So I'm not going to be able to type very quickly for a few more weeks, but after that, I'll be able to. Okay, so now, tell me what, and I can write, sort of, like a kindergartner with my left. So tell me what all of you are also hoping to see in this book, or what, I'm right now in the thinking phase and I have lots of notes, but what are you expecting to be emphasized? or what obvious have I left out? I've left out a central chapter on technology, but technology has been central to this church, from the beginning, different forms of technology. This church was the first one that had a radio program, for instance. And the way the technological advances occur, there's always some like, oh boy, I hate those TVs at the front of it. And I'm right there with pulpit. And boy, I don't like this, all of this right here where Eric Nielsen is. But then, it's really, really helpful. And if we hadn't had our technology, and if we hadn't had a website, what would the congregation, then we might have felt really isolated during COVID. And this allowed people from all over, and it's like Michelle Evans and Greg Howard, listen to the Presbyterian service every week, because even though they've lived in South Dakota for all of these years, they never found a church that they really enjoyed attending, but they love doing hours. And Joyce Orr does the same thing.
I was just gonna say, Al Myers.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who are gone who can remain, gone geographically, but can remain a central part of this congregation. Anyway, so technology will be in there, but just each place. So are there other things, Mary?
Well, from that time, excuse me, until now, even though, we were community oriented and we wanted it, it seems like it is more so now. It has been reaching out much more to the community than it has in the past, in many ways.
Yeah, and there's, I think we were always doing that, what was it called, when during Lent, when all of the pastors in the different churches went to, we all went to different churches.
Right.
What's that program?
Sermons a la carte.
Yeah, sermons a la carte. We always did that good thing, but not quite the same as, reaching out. Even what you would think Missouri Synod Lutherans would be so distant from Presbyterians, but since they right now have this, Mr. Court's church, they right now have this really great minister who works very nicely with the other ministers. And so great outreach. And the Catholics, I've got some good stories on the Catholics, but not our Catholics right here, but just in general. But when the open table started, Lisa, my twin, was executive director of the YW, and Dan Deffenbaugh was really interested in the open table, and he was at Hastings College at that time, and what's the name of the person, the guy who now runs Open Table, who is the administrator of Open Table when it's actually distributed. He was there at the beginning too, and the first Open Tables were actually at the YW.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What was his first name? Dan Rudd?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Dan Rudd?
I don't know. So I've gotta find out. We're going over there, talking to Catholic Social Services, and you think it's Dan Rutt?
Well.
No,
I don't
he
think so.
revived.
Yeah,
He's revived.
Yeah, there you go. And he started out with homeless
Crossroads.
at Crossroads, yeah.
Tom
Okay.
Schick has
So
been
I
there
think
for a
I'm
long time.
Oh, Tom. Okay, that might be another person. I'm gonna. Yeah.
Would you like a secretary? I'd be happy to.
I was just thinking.
Look, I can do it.
You can.
I can do it.
Yeah.
These are my notes for today. Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
I
that's
can't see it from there. I can do it. I can actually do my right hand too. I did write to Lisa with my right hand. Looking just like her little 5-year-old friend. Okay, yeah, so that, oh, Dan, we were just talking about you. Wonderful. And so I was just saying, that one of the things that I still need to do is attend Dan, Beth, and Bob's Zoom meeting, because how am I gonna talk about, that isn't what I was saying, but since you appeared, it's just like on my list of things to catch up on, and I haven't attended the different adult education forums, yes, but not the different Bible studies that are now going on, which speaking of Christian education, that's definitely something that I want to include. It's not just the children and the kids, it is a whole bunch of different adult groups. And I'm fascinated that, I mean, I remember going to a Methodist Bible study with a friend of mine when I was in college, just because she asked me to. And I thought it was really interesting to do Bible study. And then, but I didn't know about all of these different programs. Yeah, well.
Oh, well, I was
you've
gonna
been
follow
involved
up,
in
the food ministry.
Oh, yeah.
There's
Food.
United Harvest, there's
Yeah.
packing food.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a whole range of food ministries, more I think than
yeah.
ever. And I have a second thing, which you were starting to get to, go and serve.
Oh, go and serve. Yeah, go
It's
and,
still going,
go
and
and
40
serve.
trees for
Yeah.
40 years.
it's pretty amazing. The Go and Serve continues now, and Go and Serve even goes and serves in Romania, for instance. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
It strikes me that the communion offerings began because I think it was
Oh,
something
yes.
that Carl Utley
Yes.
suggested during his tenure here. And that's one aspect of outreach that's pretty subtle, but wow, has it been powerful. Because we actually had a mission fair here in our church. It
Yes.
took over the fellowship hall and went everywhere. Of all the folks in our congregation who are directly related to some particular activity in our community. And then a whole bunch of other people thought of, well, and here's somebody who needs something that nobody's thought of yet. And that became an even
That's
more powerful witness.
Yes, I remember reading about that too, Sharon, and that was really important because as mission moved to, we need to have these local missions, and we need to decide each year which missions we're supporting with these different communion Sunday offerings, and which of our foreign missions. And just reading up for other reasons, what our foreign missions used to be and who we supported and the letters we have and the outreach we had with various, Indian tribes here and various other schools for orphaned people, and some problematic and some very helpful. So, it's really interesting. And yes, I have it down in missions, local and international, with Open Table, Hands Around the World, Peace Center. But I have been keeping really, pretty good track of that, and, was fascinated by the communion offerings. But that started, you think it started with?
It was part of Carl's suggestion to the session.
Yeah.
The reverse
Got it.
Advent giving would be
Mm-hmm.
kind of an
Okay.
outreach from the communion.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell me, when did the store start
Oh, yeah.
in
Yeah,
the,
I have that date.
That's good.
Yeah, the international store that does now.
Yeah.
I had that date and it was earlier than I thought.
oh, good.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know, they
The
used to
free
bring it
trade.
in at certain times a year and it would just be sold
Yeah,
at an event. before it was ever a
Yes,
store.
Yeah, before we actually
Yeah.
had
Mhm.
the actual space.
Yeah.
And I was keeping track of that too. Yeah,
You mentioned, Romania. Well,
yeah.
Ginny went twice,
Mhm.
so there's a source. Sarah went once, I went once, but Ginny went twice. And then the church has done, we went to the tornado-stricken town in Kansas.
Mhm.
And I remember John Volke and I worked up on the roof,
Mhm.
roofing a house. So there's that, and Brian Johnson, Ginny was also on that, and others went up to the Pine Ridge.
Yes,
Anyone else go to the Pine Ridge? And worked
yes.
up there, so there's been a series of things that have continued.
Mhm.
And then Scouts, the last 25 years have been, as you all know, very challenging. But Kenny and I wrote a piece that was in our newsletter a few months ago about the history of scouting, but the last 25 years is in there, and Harvey Friedley
Yes.
would be a key person for
Yeah,
that.
and I remember speaking with you about
Yes,
that,
you
and so I will
Thank you.
get hold of Harvey on Boy Scouts. Yes.
These adult forums, I'm not sure when they began. You mentioned education and adult education, these adult forums.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because we were looking for where they were today, right? They morphed
You
around.
asked me to look up the date, and it was your first year when you came here.
2001.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so that's when that started, and it's been the longest running one. And I have the dates for each of the others, and so, and some of them were really heirs apparent. But I was thinking, now why are we using that royalty term here? Who are these people that are gonna become the kings and the princes right now? But anyway, that's not what it meant. But it was a fun name, yes. So there are a number of these adult education, and some talk about books. So, yeah, so I have to visit all of those. Sorry, Dan, you missed all of the rest of what I'm really gonna say in the book. So now I'm just asking for,
I'm sorry, I'm on cookie duty this morning.
The most important one.
It doesn't matter. Come whenever you want to. No, and we're just two other suggestions, things that you hope will be included in the book.
You started balls rolling here because we talk about cookie duty, all these forms of fellowship. I don't know whether it comes under something formal, like congregational life, or packing lunches for the open table, because or, the food trucks in the parking lot. I'm not sure where all those fit. Those might not show up in minutes.
What about also making the casseroles for people who need it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
New mothers.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Good.
that's a really good point, Pat. I was underlining those too, because I wasn't aware it's not just the deacons who do that, and it wasn't just the Presbyterian women. There is a much broader group than I had thought I remembered. And so, yeah, that's really important. And actually, I did sketch out just this little, when I could still use both hands, I had sketched out, what I was going to say at the beginning. And, one of the things that I said about the memorial room in this little sketch that I'm not gonna read, because it's not gonna appear in the book, but anyway, it helped me gather my thoughts, is when you're in the memorial room, and the first time I was noticing that, and I was just looking at all the doors in the memorial room, and one of the doors, of course, and this was in July, leads right down that hallway to Fellowship Hall, and all you saw were all of the things that we were going to be packing, that the congregation packs together every Sunday in July, that placed it in my little introduction, the food ministry, to remind myself that there is a huge outreach, and it's the great unpleasantness, but really patience before the two-to-play ministry has a lot to do with food ministry too. That even if
different members of the congregation, disagree on other things, everybody agrees that we need to distribute food, and everybody supports it. So it was a really sort of important point, yes, and so I won't forget that. Now, everybody who's here, of course, is agreeing to read every draft of this book, right? And make your suggestions as you go. Thank you very much. Yes.
Oh, one more, I'm talking too much, but I don't think you mentioned the choir, but the choir program
Yeah,
has
the
changed.
music
The
ministry.
music
and-
and the
yeah.
bell choir.
Yeah.
And when was the organ last sort of, you'll
There's a
know,
last what?
well, revised or tuned or,
I
Well,
have,
every year it's
yeah,
checked.
well, but there was a fairly major thing in the last
Yes.
25 years.
Oh, that was probably
You'll
about
know.
6 or 7
Yeah,
years
that's what
ago.
I'm thinking of.
yeah, there was
So-
a major
Yeah.
one, and I have all of the numbers
There you
on
go.
what it actually costs to replace versus refurbish parts of that wonderful organ. And the organ, well, and the bells. Everybody thinks the bells just started recently, but
Oh,
Sue
yeah.
Nitterman, I mean,
Yeah.
Sue, she wasn't even Nitterman then before. Sue Metzger and I remember doing the bells when we were in college. So, we
And-
had bells before. We may not have owned them, but
We did it as kids.
and we
Mom.
had those,
Yeah.
kids, and I can't
Well, we
do it
we
because,
had the big one, they were the big ones when we were in school.
oh, I know, but remember, we had to do it like, there was a special thing
Yes,
to
it was-
actually make it ring.
Yeah.
Because
think they
otherwise, I mean,
upgraded
if you
since
just did a wrist thing, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Do an arm thing. So,
And
as kids,
We
we
did.
could, but who was even doing that with us?
Dr. Goodrich was maybe the leader.
Oh,
Dr.
But
Goodrich
no,
was our choir
did the
director
choir,
for
I don't
all
think
of
he
those
did
years, from junior high on.
Uh-huh.
I love how the choir's names changed over the years too. Oh,
And most people don't know that this church was a major sponsor for the Mary Lanning Hospice Choir.
Oh, right.
It helped
I
to
didn't know
fund the
that.
start of it and fund, those, CDs, Caring Voices.
I didn't know that.
And Tom Mahalik would be a key
Yeah.
source for that. And it is a big thing, but it is something.
It's important.
Yeah, just as we're thinking about outreach of the church, I mean, church and community. Yeah, it would be nice to have, that's actually a really nice, list to have, you know, since I'm not doing all of the penny lists, but it would be a really nice, reference to how many different civic, and not just service, but, you know, civic engagement, yeah, church and community. Mhm. Don't laugh at me, Dan, for writing this way. When I was talking with Dan, he was laughing at me for writing on a piece of paper with my right hand. And so I'm sure he's looking at me saying, and now it's the left hand. What's Elmo doing out there? Okay, are there other things? It's been a great help to me. I thank you very much. And if you think of other things, I am lmarvel@hastings.edu. And I have a Salida, Colorado phone number.
And you'll find her upstairs in the Hastings College Library.
Yeah, yeah, periodically.
No pun intended.
Oh, good.
Too many smart people.
Oh.
Okay, so, yeah, that's what I wanted to start with. So how come all of you are not writing this book? No, I know the reason, because I've been sort of, you know, at the periphery, and you see things differently. from the periphery than you do if you're in the center of things. So I'm going with that. I'm sticking with that. And I'm learning as I'm going.
Thanks for doing it. It's an
Yeah,
important part.
Just don't take me until you see it.
Well, even pulling together the notes is a lot of work, I can imagine.
Oh, it's fun work though. That's the fun part. And, there's just all of this writing of histories, thinking of Charlie too, is, you're thinking of what of all the details to include, but also how to phrase it, because it's always the person who's writing who might on purpose or inadvertently add a slant that's intended or not. And so that's one of the things that I'm really cognizant of, to make sure that things are, there aren't just facts. Everything is a story and it happens to be from my perspective. And so that's why I want a lot of people to read it
And say, I think you're overemphasizing this and not this and that, and that's suggesting so and so and so and so. So, yeah.
You might get a little bit of an idea, since you told us about ideas that previous authors left for their successors. What else you can talk more about, kind of things. And I thought there are a lot of people who've been here in the last 25 years, and that's their lifetime. When you're looking at us, because we're older. But there might be some in that young group who might like to talk about their life in our congregation, with the idea that here's the future. In other words,
Yeah,
and there's
yeah.
this is kind of the send off.
that's a
When
really-
you were mentioning go and serve,
Mhm.
lots of young people have
Yeah.
talked about the impact that had later in their lives,
It's a
things like
really
that.
good point, because I was talking to, obviously the ministers, but also Christian education and music and all of these current people, but not the actual young people. I now am knowing a few of those young people, and so it'll be interesting to, find out.
Kendra brought her congregation here this summer,
Yeah,
for example.
yeah.
And that was interesting, because they were all fascinated, with what we do for our activities, but they also kind of wanted to know a little bit how she was when she was growing up.
Well, didn't we also just have the Go and Serve group from college that had requested that they go again, and they took a second group this year?
Yeah.
So it
Oh, in
still
August.
meant a lot to them.
Yeah,
They felt like it was
Yeah, yeah.
very useful.
And it's really interesting, the relationship between the church and the college. It changes quite a lot during the years, not in terms of how many profs and students are members of the Presbyterian Church, but what they actually do, what the church does in terms of reaching out to college students at different periods of our history. Even in the last 25 years, it's changed a lot. And some of it has to do with whoever the college chaplain is at the time, too. So,
Choir, once again, we have
I say,
a dozen college students singing in our choir now.
yeah, and
So-
I was recording that when that started, and when we're using some of the Langenberg money to compensate the college members, section
Yes.
leaders in the choir. And so that's, yeah. Mhm.
Will you be joining Dr. Lloyd next Sunday when we talk about Hastings?
No, but he
College?
did tell me that the information I gave him before is now used enough times, and can't I dig up something else? That's what I'll be doing.
I think that is our focus next Sunday, isn't it?
I know.
For Hastings College Sunday. So you can come back, you guys can do a little, Q&A, that would be great. Student, current.
No, I don't want to tell his own stories. But I'll give him some other interesting information too. Okay, is it time for church?
Can we
Oh,
say-
not yet?
Let's have a word of prayer and then we can send off. How does that
Oh.
sound? That's it.
Good.
Dear gracious God, thank you for memories. Thank you for moving forward from memories with your help to make things more like the world you would have it be. In Jesus' name, amen.
That was a really good point. When we're just praying, not singing, we say amen. It's only when we're singing that we say amen. Now, that's what we learned from choir. Okay. Thank you for clarifying once again and
Things I do.
reinforcing that really important point. Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Laura.
Interesting.